Good morning. Welcome to today's class. My name is Jon Witt, and this is a fundamental class based in giving you a good base so that you can practice on your own. I really believe in self-practice. So the classes are giving people tips so that you can kind of navigate through some limitations that you may have or injuries that you may have, and if there's something that you just can't do. There's a long list of things that you can do, and you could always email me, you could always direct message me so that I can help you more specifically if that was ever the case. I love knowing that if you are taking the class, you could always send me a message and let me know how it's going. And even if there's something that you'd like to suggest, I'm always open to suggestions. All my information is on my website. It's jonwittyoga.com. You could make a donation if you're able to, and if you're not, you could help the class by liking the class and sharing the class with people that you might find that would benefit from taking class with me. So I'm going to be working a little bit on your hips today and your shoulders to start. So you don't need a lot of equipment. I'm going to use the wall at some point just as a reference, but you could use a corner of a wall, so you don't have a big open wall space. You could use a corner of the wall. So I'm just going to have my hands on my hips, and I'm going to be moving my pelvis in a circular rotation. So nothing really big to start. I'd make it really small. I really believe in mobilizing the body daily, and it doesn't have to be a lot, right? It could be something of 5 minutes. And as you get more into it, you'll really know and see like what you actually need more of. So hip rotations, this is probably the easiest way to do it, and it's moving other areas. So the benefit is that as you're moving your pelvis in space, your hips, this is when my hips carry forward, this is hip extension, and when my hips carry back in space, it's hip flexion. So let's say you have a hard time moving your hips forward in space. It's not a bad thing, right? But it would mean that you probably are going to struggle with extending your upper body and your spine. And then I'm going to circle my hips in the opposite direction. And then as I'm moving, I want to connect into my feet. So if I'm a flat-footed person, I'm trying to lift through the arches of the feet. And if I'm more of a high arch person, I'm trying to get more relaxed and more weight. So you're kind of like ironing out the high arch, if that's something that you have. And just kind of see which direction you struggle in moving. And with these, you could start with like 10, probably be doing about 15, I would say, I'm not counting. Some people better off in timing these things. And then with timing them, you're not really caught up in the number, and you can focus more on the exercise. You can get more in tune with what's actually happening. So I'm just going to come back into the middle, and with my hands on my hips, I'm just going to move my pelvis so you can see better. I'm in a posterior tilt, and then I'm in an anterior tilt. Posterior tilt is all back bends, and anterior tilts are forward bends. So I'm tucking, and then I'm pushing out, and you could do these for the rest of your life, and they'll always be interesting because we are aging, and to move the pelvis, you're really isolating more traction in the spine. So if you're more one of the other, it's not to say that you shouldn't do it, but maybe you're not doing it as much as I am. So I'm pushing it out, and then I'm bringing it down. I'm sticking it out, and then I'm bringing it down, and then I'm going to continue to have my hands on my hips, and I'm going to bend my knees, and I'm just moving the pelvis side to side. So it's really moving up and down, and you can get your legs involved because this can be quite difficult for someone in moving. And I say this all the time, maybe you don't want to do these in a park or in a gym because people will be like, hey, what's that person doing? But very, very good. If you're starting to see yourself walking, like you're limited in the way that you walk, a lot of it comes from the pelvis. So if you can keep the pelvis strong and mobile, it's going to really help with your moving. And if you want to move more dynamically, this is the initial motions of anything that you're doing, whether it be dance, gymnastics, any kind of movement. So I'm going to come back in the middle, and what I'm going to do is circle the pelvis in a circular motion. And again, these can be a little bit more difficult to do. So you could go back to the hip rotations. As the first exercise that I had done, those are pretty easy for anyone. I mean, they can be complicated, but you could go back to them and then refine those motions, and then you could come back into more of the pelvic circles. So just kind of moving the pelvis in space. And you can move really slow. Let's say you're like, I don't necessarily know how well my pelvis moves in space. I'm much slower. Not that you have to move incredibly slow. It can be very helpful as well. So you're just going to come back in the middle. We're going to go back to the posterior anterior just to make it more neutral. So I'm going to tuck underneath, and then I'm going to stick it out a bit. I'm going to bring it underneath, and then I'm just going to come into a relaxed position. So just moving some weight into my right foot. So I'm just on the outer edge of my foot. So if you've ever rolled your ankle, it's probably going to be difficult to do initially, but you can add more and more weight into the foot. And then I'm going to roll into my left side. And let's say it was really difficult for you to bring the weight like I am, you could hold onto a wall. But what I said about walking, it comes from feet as well. Obviously, if you're limited in how well your feet move in your shoes, it'll factor in how well you walk. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and I'm just going to lift my toes and then lower my toes. So I'm lifting all 10 toes, and then I'm bringing them down, and then I'm bringing them up, and then I'm bringing them down. I'm going to have my hands behind me. I'm going to hook my thumbs, and I'll come up onto the toes. So I'll lift the heels off the floor. So something really basic. And then if I could, I'm just going to keep my chest squared, but I'm just going to turn my head. And then when people turn their head, you might notice that one side of your head is lifting. It's because you may lack that rotation. So I'm going to turn it forward. I'm going to keep my chest neutral, and then just turning my head. And not that turning the body is bad, but it's good to be accurate at times, because then you can really be a little bit more specific, and you can adjust the body a little bit more. Like if I keep my body squared, it's adjusting my neck more, right? And then I'm going to lower my feet, and I'm just going to bring my feet into a neutral stance, and I'm going to step my left foot in front of my right foot. So I'm just in this straight line, and when I'm in the straight line, I'm going to, either people are too far back when they stand, or they're too far forward. It's usually one or the other. So I'm bringing more weight into my left foot. For you, it might be that you have to pull the weight back. A good way to measure this is to take a picture from the side, and you'll see like if you lean too far forward or too far back, or possibly sometimes people's heads are too far forward. Well, then it's just the head that's moving back. When you get a good line like this, it should be a little difficult or more, right, to stand like this. So it's okay if your feet are crooked, but getting your feet to line up is ultimately what we're doing, and eventually you can close the eyes. So the eyes close just adds more difficulty in standing, but it's great if you had a hallway where you could touch either wall. Like I have at our front door, we have like a laundry closet and our front door. So that's a good spot that I could do, right? Then I'm going to bring my left foot next to my right, and then I'm going to set my right foot in front of my left foot. So it's okay if your feet are crooked initially. Not bad at all. It's okay to hold something. These are good things to do, especially if you have something joint related in the lower body. But then once you line up the feet and you want to close your eyes, you can do that. And then, it's going to be challenging to balance, which is going to help with your proprioception. Just knowing how to organize yourself in space and in time. And then I'm going to bring my right foot back into neutral. I'm going to have my hands again back behind me. I'm going to come up onto the toes. So I'm going to lift the heels, right, just in a straight line. So sometimes people, again, are too far forward with their hips. So if you feel like you're leaning back in space, right, you'd want to pull the hips back. And then you can lower the heels and you can take the arms out to the side. So I'm gonna have my thumbs up and my hands are in fists, and I'm just rotating from my shoulders. So I'm trying to rotate my shoulders forward and down and in. And I'm a right-handed person, so I use a little bit more effort in my left shoulder because I need it more on my left side. And then I'm gonna rotate back with the thumbs up, and then I'm gonna rotate back, and then it's very easy to move more from your elbow and your wrist. Not that that's such a bad thing, but try to isolate more of the motion or the movement, the integration into the shoulders. So I'm gonna rotate the thumbs up, then I'm gonna rotate them forward. And I'm doing these really slow, pretty methodical. I'm gonna do some arm swings today. So these are probably gonna be better if you're hypermobile. So if you're a person that's like, you've had multiple shoulder separations, something like that, you wouldn't wanna be swinging your arms if that was the case, right? Eventually you could, right? I'm gonna take it up, thumbs are up, and thumbs are back. And then in this, remember the posterior tilt? So when I'm in a posterior tilt, I need that more because I rely heavily on swaying my back when I stand. So for you, it might be the opposite. And then I'm gonna bring my arms down. So I'm gonna just moving my body a little bit, my arms, I'm gonna do some arm swings, is that I wanna create the motion from my lower body. So I'm just moving my pelvis, and then I'm swinging my arms. And say you've never done this before, make it really small. I'm doing it really small. Just get used to it. I say this all the time. When I'm doing something in an exercise that I've never done before, I'll be really careful and just really watch what I'm actually doing. And then as I get more familiar with it, I could pick up the speed. Not that a greater speed is better, but just let your arms be relaxed and as if your arms are crashing. And if you have no, if you can really kind of hear it, because it's raining here where I'm at, it's like windshield wipers. So it reminds me of. So the windshield wipers go back and forth. There's a cadence to it. So again, try to move from your pelvis, and then it makes it really efficient. You don't have to use a lot of effort. It's very good for the shoulders, very good for the spine and the pelvis, but you don't want to be collapsing into your knees. So if you ever did it in front of a mirror or you videotaped yourself, you'd see very well if your knees kind of fall in. But, like anything, say like, I'm done swinging my arms, you just stand, which is a practice in itself. So I'm just going to stand in a posterior tilt with my knees bent. I'm not going to stand very long, but this is something that you could always do on your own or in a class. So I'm bringing the tailbone underneath. I'm just letting the arms, more of like a Tai Chi or, more of an Eastern stance, not like a yoga stance. Not that you couldn't be standing in mountain, but my tailbone's underneath. And then once I get my pelvis underneath me, I'm just going to relax the pelvis. And I'm just going to let the chest kind of be sunken. The majority of your spine rounds. So in keeping it a bit rounded, actually stretches it out. Not that extensions are bad, right? We want to be able to extend from the thoracic. But I'm just kind of, my tailbone is my focal point, and the crown is lifting. And I'm just working on standing. And I really believe in standing meditation for someone that had back pain. So if you have back pain, any kind of back pain, neck pain, I think standing meditation is better, but it really depends on the person too. Some people can very well do seated meditation even though they have back pain, but generally speaking, I like a standing position because what you're doing is you're letting your legs absorb the weight, and you're and having this support from your legs rather than your lower back. Because when you're sitting, it doesn't matter the position. Usually, you may be too much in the lower back or too much in the neck. So just take a few deep breaths. Let the shoulders relax. Let the arms relax. Let the waters of your belly wash back into your lumbar, and then you're just stand. You can stand for like 2-3 minutes, and then you can come back up into a straight position. So I'm going to go back to moving a bit of the spine, and then I'll go back to moving the arms. But at some point you're like, I just need to sit. that's a good, 10, 15-minute practice. And maybe that's all you need for today. But I'm going to move my torso just into a side bend. So with yoga, usually, right, it's static positions. And that's what I'm going to do initially. I'm just doing a side bend. I'm letting my arm relax. You can let your head tilt to your left shoulder, and then that can expose more and more the right side, which is quite nice. And again, you can get the pelvis underneath you like we just were in that standing meditation. And then bring yourself up and then side bend to the right, and then the whole left side's picking up. And, you can feel how the effects are different from going to each side. Not that you should only do one side, but you might see that one side's more valuable today. So you could let the head tilt to the right shoulder. And then bring yourself back up. And then just keep your pelvis neutral. And I'm just going to twist my torso. But very, this is subtle, but keep your pelvis squared. And then as you square it, then you're just turning from the upper body, from the thoracic. And then I'm going to turn. I'm keeping my head neutral so that I'm not twisting from my neck. I'm twisting just from my torso. And then as I'm just twisting from my torso, it makes it way more specific in adjusting the spine. If I'm turning my head, you might only be turning your head. You might not be turning your torso at all, really. So take a couple deep breaths, and then you can come back into the middle. So I'm going to do a little bit of motion of the thoracic, but just to get you to move around a little bit, because standing still can be a little, cut off circulation in the feet. So I'm just moving around a little bit. So as I'm moving from foot to foot, kind of like what I was doing before, but I say this often, how tight your feet are really reflects how tight your body is. So if you have really, really tight feet or hands, it usually carries out throughout the body. So I'm just kind of moving the weight around just to add some, again, so you're not so much on your feet. I'll come down on the hands just because I've been standing so much, but I want to come up and do a little bit more motions of the arms, which I think is really great. So just come down onto your hands and knees, and with your hands just underneath you, I can turn my fingers forward, but I could also turn my hands out to the sides if you didn't know. You might be like, wow, that's so much better for my hand, my wrist. And that's, when I work with people, or I have worked with people over the years, just some people their hands are just too arthritic to have the hands forward, the fingers forward. So if the hands turn out, it's much easier in the wrist. And if still it's too hard for you, you could be on your fist, right, which is also very good. So come back into the middle and just round through the upper back and just hold the rounding of the back, right? Just press through the hands and round through the spine. Get a good rounding of your back, right? And then look forward and look up and move. It's very easy to just move from your lower back. So feel what you're actually moving, and what you want to be moving is the higher facets of the spine. So like imagine my hands into your upper back, and that you're able to lift your chest more. And then go back into the rounding position. And I'm just doing like either one, and I'm isolating them, so hopefully you can see what you need more of. A healthy spine, you certainly need both. But if you had an unhealthy spine, you might want to just pick one or the other. So round through the upper back, and then you can be in an anterior tilt of the pelvis, but then get more of the isolation into your upper back. Like it's very well, we most people overly use their lower back, specifically with back bending. So you want to get more and more extension into the higher facets of the spine. And then just come back to neutral and take the hands over the left side and look high over the left shoulder. So lift the head, lift the chest, just being a little bit of a rounded, like bring your belly and your ribs in. And then take your hands over to the right side and you can look high over the right shoulder. So just lifting the head. Right, pull the left hip back. and then bring your hands back into the middle. And with the hands here, just let your chest drop down in between your arms and then press. So the arms stay straight the whole time. So these are really good to learn how to do push-ups eventually, right? Which I think is an excellent basic level of strength. You should be able to do push-ups, right? So let the chest move down and then press. Let the chest come down and then press back up. And then one more time, let it relax down. This is retraction of the shoulders. And then the pressing is protraction, which you need for plank, right? So I'm going to come up into a plank pose. I'm going to lift my knees up off the floor. I'm going to pull up and in with the belly and the ribs. So I'm in a more of a hollow position. And you can move the weight around, of course. And then I'm going to come into a down dog, just so that give your knees a little bit of a break. But pedal the legs out. So move the legs in space, which, if you have tight hamstrings, probably the best thing to do is a motion. And then a static position is good. Say you really like working your legs straight, of course you can do that. But turn the heels out slightly, and then as you turn the heels out, you should feel more space from your waist up to your shoulders. And we're going to come forward and through into an up dog. So come forward and through, the arms are straight, and you're lifting yourself up. And then just kind of see if you're using one eye more than the other, because you might be turned. It's really common. And then pull back up into a down dog. Pull back through the thighs. If you really want to get the feet down, make the stance a little bit shorter. And then that's really good for the calf muscles, the hips, posterior, right? But then when you transition, make it a little longer, just so it's not so heavy in the wrist. And then come forward and through, and use your index fingers, use your thumbs, elevate your upper body, squeeze your glutes. Keep lifting through the torso. Maybe you're already back up into down dog, right? And then go back up into a down dog. And then come down onto your knees. And then when you come down onto your knees, I'm going to have my toes tucked. I'm going to sit back towards my feet. So there's a lot of great, classic positions. But if the feet are really tight, it can be really hard on the knees. And so this is why I do this often for people. But if I had higher feet, I would just come forward and then go back, because this is really what you most likely need. If I'm a flat-footed person, untucking the toes and sitting back towards the feet is most likely going to be not necessarily better, but more needed. And then you can come forward, and then you could also sit back. So it's good to hold a pose. It's nice. I think anybody can hold something for 5-10 seconds. And it might be really, really uncomfortable, but the good thing is you can come out and then you can go back into it again, right? So come back onto your hands and your knees and protract through the shoulders, lift back up into plank, reach back through the heels, make yourself nice and hollowed in the front of the body, and then go up into a down dog. So in a down dog, we're going to walk your feet forward and then walking your hands back towards your feet so that you're in a standing forward bend. So if I have herniation, I want extension in my lower back. But if I don't have a herniation in my lower back, and I don't have osteoporosis, but if you say you had osteoporosis years ago, and I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but let's say that was years ago and you corrected some of it, you can start to load up your spine, in my opinion, because you want to make the spine strong again. And if you completely avoid certain positions or motions, that's a big reason why the spine becomes so calcified and so hollow, right? It's like coral reef, and that's how it can break. But initially, you wouldn't want to bring so much weight into it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to round my back. So I'm going to bend my knees and round my spine. And this is what you get from doing plow pose, which is a very, very good position eventually. And that's why I like doing this position more and more for someone, so that you're basically prepping yourself to do that particular position, right? You don't want to just do that pose, especially, say you you did it years and years ago. Just because you did it years and years ago, you're probably not ready for it, right? You're going to prepare for it. So I'm going to round my back. So I'm rounding, right? And then I'm going to take my hands over to the left side, but I'm still rounding, so I'm changing the position. So it's, the stress is in my upper back, not my lower back at all. And I'm taking my hands to the right side, and I'm rounding. Right? And say you're like, I have kyphosis. Rounding beyond your kyphosis will help correct the kyphosis. So I get people and they're like, oh, I'm so rounded or whatever. And it's like, well, the rounding will help straighten you up, right? Then bring it back into the middle and just keep rounding, right? So where you're not touching the floor, but you're in a nice round position. I'm going to slowly roll myself up. And then when I come up, let's say you're like, whoa, that hurt my back, right? Because that could be the case. You're too much in your lower back, right? And most Eastern yoga, if you look at any yoga text or book, you'll see all these rounding positions. And from a Western opinion, often it's like, oh, that's wrong. But they were actually right. The Eastern yoga is correct. Sometimes Western yoga it can be, opinions of a Western yogi can be very healthy, but also too, they can be a little bit off. So I'm in a standing position. I'm going to come up on my toes. I'm going to lift my heels off the floor. So I'm up, right? And then I'm going to lower the heels. And then I'm going to go back into that side bend, just a basic side bend. And I'm going to let my head tilt to the left shoulder. And let's say that's, too much for the neck, keep the head neutral. You don't have to bring the head down. But if I'm okay with that, I'm going to actually explore bringing my head closer to my shoulder, which is eventually very good for the neck. And then bring yourself up, and then you can side bend to the right. And then as you're off to the right, I can let my head relax to my right shoulder. And you can use a little bit of effort in bringing it down or picking up the left side. Both can be helpful or useful. And then you can bring yourself back up. Come back into this cactus position. So I have your arms in a cactus position and making my hands in a fist. So I did this earlier with the arms straight, but the reason I do things differently is so that you can actually be like, oh, okay. Because if I always did it the same way, anybody can really fall in love with one thing, but you want diversity will really help in giving you more of a healthy perspective as far as what's good. So this is an internal rotation, and this is an external rotation, right? But I'm trying to move from my shoulder, I'm not like in a fly, like where I'm taking my arms back. I'm moving my shoulder externally rotated. Then I'm gonna move it forward just one more time. If you have rounded shoulders, you'd be like, oh, this is a piece of cake, because that's what your shoulder does, and that's what's easy for you. But getting the arms to move a little bit beyond what is your ability, then going beyond is eventually good, right? And then you can take the arm back, and then I'm just moving back. And a little bit of weight can be really good with this, especially if you're weak in your shoulders. Then take the arms up overhead and bring your shoulders to your ears. Like really reach out. And if your shoulders don't touch your ears, it's fine, right? But this is what happens, like I'm bending my knees. This is like an adaptation of an Utkatasana, but I'm really reaching up. Not the classic way of being taught, but I'm getting more of a stretch through my scapula, right? I'm really extending the arms up to stretch out my upper back and my shoulders. And then I'm going to have my legs straight, and then I'm going to depress the shoulders, and I'm going to lift the shoulders, and then depress, and then lift, and then depress, and then you can take the arms back down. So maybe again you want to sit, but I'm going to move the arms a bit in space, and this is where I'll do some without the wall, which is much easier. But then as you get more used to this, then the wall can be a really good reference, so that you can correct how you're moving your shoulder in space. So just from this side, so you can see it a little bit better. So I'm just gonna, and it could be a partial swing, right? You can bring it just forward and back. Like I said, if you have hypermobility, maybe you don't want to be swinging your arm, but I'm gonna swing it back in space, right? And just move kind of slow initially. And then as you get used to these, they can be quite fast, right? I'm just gonna do it slow today just so that you know, last thing I wanna do is hurt someone. So I'm just turning my chest as the arm goes back, right? And then, you know, not a lot, probably again, 10 to 15, something like that. And I'm not so much on numbers. Like when I do these, usually I just time myself. So it's never about the number. So again, when your arm is moving back in space, you can see I'm turning my chest. So there's a little bit of rotation. But when we were swinging the arms earlier, right, I was moving the pelvis, and that's what can move the arm here, right? I can generate a little bit more motion from my lower body. If you had like a knee injury, maybe it's not good to do these just because it can bring a little bit of stress into the legs. Just go back to having the arms beside you and just let the arms kind of swing a little bit. And you may be like, oh, this is good, this is good. This is so good for my shoulders. Well, then that's what you use. And then the ones that aren't so good for you, right? It's not to say that you should never do them, but maybe you give it some time and you do them at a later time. But I am going to use the wall just because I think this is a good way to kind of learn it. So when I'm close to the wall, I'm going to take the right arm and then I'm going to turn my chest. So I'm probably about 2 inches away from the wall. If you have really tight shoulders, you probably want to be a little bit further away from the wall initially, and then you can get closer. So I'm going to bring the arm up, and then I'm going to bring it back, right? And you can kind of let it move in space faster if you wanted to. Really good for circulation. So I'm just turning to the other side just to keep it, you know, somewhat even. Now the first couple, I just want to get used to the motion, and you can look to the hand as you do it, because you can eventually do windmills, which is opposite arm moving in space. So if you want to pick up the pace, you can do that. And then you can kind of shake it off. I'm just going to go back to just letting the arms kind of crash. Really good for wrists. So notice when your hands, the back arm, just kind of brings flexion and extension into the wrist. So moving my pelvis, just letting my arms move. And then I'm going to do a little bit of neck work for you. So tilting the head, rotations are probably the easiest thing, but tilting the head is probably like the next stage. So just let the head move to your right shoulder, move to your left, move to your right, moving to the left. And as you move your head, you know, again, as you get more familiar with these, you can use a little bit more effort, just a little bit, nothing crazy, right? But then you can really manipulate the soft tissue around the cervical. And then taking it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn my head, but keep my head neutral, or my chest neutral. And turning the head to the opposite side. And then bringing it center, and then to the right. And then to the left, and then center. So I'm going to look down, bringing the chin into the chest or close to it. Then I'm going to look forward, and I'm going to look up. If you look up long enough, especially if you don't have a lot of extension ability in spine, things will crack, things will pop. Not that you're going for that, but that will happen. You can bring your chin down, chin in the chest. You can look forward, you can look up. And then just bring the head down. chin into the chest, and just hold for a couple breaths. And then you can bring the head back to neutral. So I'm going to circle the head, which is, kind of covers everything. Not everything, but it covers a lot. So I'm just moving the head in a circular motion and try not to move the upper body. Just move the head and say you're like, no, I shouldn't be doing that. Then you stick with what works, And then as you gain more ability, and you will with good practice, then you can go back to doing more diverse exercises. Because eventually, what's really, really good for us, you're like, oh, this was so good for me. You don't want to wear it out, right? You can bring the head down. Like I know people, especially in the yoga community, and they overdo certain positions. Like you just, I like more of a diverse type of practice, so that you're not, again, hurting yourself. And you could hold any of these angles. So you're like, oh, I really need to hold my head in this angle. You could do that. Like this is the angle for me. This, and my neck just cracked. All right, so I'm going to come down on my hands and knees. I'm going to actually sit on my toes. So my toes are tucked, and I'm going to sit back on my heels. So something like this, like these ground positions, it's good to do on a really soft surface. Like if you had like a thick carpet, or so you have you have more than a couple. Say you have 4 yoga mats. Double them up and make a big space for yourself, and work more on these, classic type of positions, which will help you in, especially if you have problematic lower body. These are very good. So I'm going to untuck the toes. I'm going to sit back on the feet. And you could be sitting on a block, right? You don't have to sit as I am. But over time, these are really great positions. It's a full range of motion. And, if you can remember back when you were a child, most likely you'd be able to do most of these things. But I know very well, I've worked with people over the years, and they'll be like, I remember when I was in elementary school, and my teacher would say, hey, you have to sit like this, and they just couldn't, right? Well, that's bone related, and that's most likely why you can't sit like that. That's, people have, it's their genetics, so they just can't, you can't change something like that. But what you can do is you can kind of get back to zero, where it's not a limitation, or it's not, hurting you in any way. So just because we've been sitting on the feet, take the legs forward, and with the legs forward, just have the feet out in front. Just circle the feet. Just get the feet to circle around. And as the feet circle around, really good for the knees, very good for the hips, and then circle around the opposite direction. So what I shared today is, something that I highly, highly recommend you do more and more of as a morning routine. And not everybody's a morning person, so it could be like an evening routine on top of what you're already doing in terms of like yoga or weight training or anything like that. It's just really, really, really good maintenance. So I'm going to come back where my knees are bent and my hands are turned out. Like I usually do these things like for 20, 30 minutes. If I need more, I'll do an hour of it, I'll push through the hands if I have the time, right? So I'm going to retract the shoulders, and maybe this is the position that I'm doing, just this. I'm going to lift the hips up, and then as I lift the hips up, I'm just going to move the weight side to side a little bit, just to adjust the shoulders, right? But I want to keep my hips up, which is going to help strengthen your hamstrings and your glutes. And then bring it down and just relax the shoulders. But then go back to pulling back, right? Open the chest, open the shoulders. And maybe you don't need another one. I'm going to come up one more time. So you can lift the hips. And then when I come up, I'm going to move forward in space if I can, but my hips are staying up. It's a good, strong position. It's really a basic position. But you know, it's in my opinion, it's very important to stay strong so that you're not so physically fragile, physically, mentally, emotionally fragile, right? So you could sit cross-legged however you want. You could stand again if you wanted to, but I'm keeping the classes a little bit shorter because I think like shorter and more concentrated is better initially, and then when you can build up a really good concentration, then of course your practice can be longer. Most of these classes that I'm doing live, they're on my YouTube channel, so you could subscribe and then you could always get updated when I'm adding a new class. But I hope the class was good for you again. Share with your friends, your family if you like the class. Give me comments if there's things that you need. If you have a specific injury, maybe it can help you in some way. If I'd have to see you. You could send me a recording and I can tell you how I would deal with an injury. So have a beautiful weekend. I have a class tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. You can register on my website for that class. All right, have a great Saturday or Sunday, wherever you're at. All right.
Hi, guys. This is our children's class as today. So I don't have a background right now. But we can make a story out of this thing. So let's start. All right, with your legs crossed, clasp your hands together, and try to get your legs like squeezed like tightly together. So you can adjust yourself if you would like you could be sitting in a chair to do this movement, and just slide your hand back, and if you would like to, you can bend yourself down on the elbow and bring your hand up and over your head. And then when you do that, if you would like to, you could actually pull the arm into your head, and then you could recross legs and do the same thing on the other side. So you can relax, take 3 deep breaths, and then you can get up, and let's just do like poses that we can do this, but it's going to slowly transform into a different pose. So let's start with down dog. Then you can lift up into cobra. If you would like to, if you're very flexible, you could bring the legs up, and try to touch the head. It's okay if you don't. And then let's come into bow pose. If you don't know what bow pose is, you can just watch me. So take one leg up, take other leg up, take one hand up, and take no hands up. Then you can just stand up in a straight position. You can hook the hands behind your back, your thumbs on the saw. I'll show you what it looks like when it's in the back. So it's going to look like this. So just try to come up on the heels. But if you can't get up on the heels, how I keep my balance is I just walk around on my heels. So if you don't need to do that, and that's great, because that's what you're trying to do at the class. So when you do that, you can turn into warrior 2. Then you could turn into warrior 1. And then if you want to do it, you can come into washing machine pose. So cross the legs, put your hands like this, and just do this. So when you're done that, you might get a little dizzy from doing that, and then you can just do this. You can bring the leg like this, and you just lift you can lift up you can stay on one leg for balance. You can put two hands out, and you can just look at me for examples, and you can do it. You can take 3 deep breaths, and then you can lower. We'll wrap it up like the same as we began. By crossing. Let's do it on the other side this time. By crossing your legs, and just namaste is just a gesture of thanks. I hope you liked the kids' class today. Bye-bye.